So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here, and this is another episode of Backroads, Arizona. In this video, I'm going to kind of give you an overview of the Cinders OHV area in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm also going to be doing an overview of the ride height adjustment that I made and let you know how I think that worked out. Now, the dunes is going to be the ultimate test for that. However, I did go to the Cinders, and this is a pretty good test as well. And then I'm also going to be doing a little bit of a rant about what we saw out camping at the Cinders and why it's rather disappointing. So let's get to it. So a couple months ago, I did a ride height adjustment to my 2020 Turbo S. Now, I did not get aftermarket springs or anything. I just readjusted my ride height because I had added a bunch of weight to my RZR, such as an aftermarket roll cage, a spare tire holder, a spare tire storage box, tools, etc., which dropped my suspension a couple inches in the front and the back. So I took that factory ride height back to spec in hopes that it would give me a little bit more travel so I wouldn't bottom out as much. So this is one of my favorite hills to run out at the Cinders, and I had done this hill probably 5 or 6 times before doing my ride height adjustment, and I had bottomed out 4 or 5 of those times when I got to the bottom, making the transition to the uphill. And most of the time, that's when you're going to bottom out, is in a situation like this. Either that or jumping, obviously, because that's when you're putting the most strain on the suspension. So from top to bottom of this hill is about 10 to 13 seconds. And at the bottom, I'm doing a minimum of 80 miles an hour because I am at full throttle and not accelerating anymore. And the governed speed of a RZR is about 80 miles an hour on a Turbo S. However, after we did do the ride height adjustment, we went back out to the Cinders, and I did that run 3 times in the same trip, and I did not bottom out on any of it. Now keep in mind, this is not going to be some amazing change in your suspension feel. All it's going to do is, if you've added a bunch of extra weight to the RZR, bring it back up to the factory setting so you have a little bit more travel, so you might not bottom out as much. You'll notice if you watched my video on the ride adjustment that my soft springs are completely collapsed, and that's because of the extra weight. I do plan on upgrading them eventually, but this is going to get me by until I have the money to do so. So as far as the Cinders go, guys, this has turned into one of my favorite places to go riding and camping. We'll be definitely making this a yearly trip. A couple things to watch out for is overheating in this volcanic rock. It does put a serious strain on your engine when you're climbing hills through this stuff, so you really want to watch your temperature. Now, I have paddle tires, but I've never used them out here just because of the fact that I've heard it will really chew up the paddle tires. So I just run the factory tires that are on my RZR, and I've done pretty much most hills that I've wanted to try and pull. There's only been a couple that I haven't been able to pull up to the top because I lost traction and I had to turn back. And as far as the stock tires, they haven't been chewed up that bad because of this volcanic rock. It does fling this rock up into the cab and around your engine and whatnot, so you got to kind of watch out for that. Give it a good cleaning when you're done out here. But this place is a blast. So one thing that was taught to me when I started going to the dunes, and it holds true out at the Cinders as well, or pretty much any time you're climbing a big hill, if you feel that you're not going to make it to the top of that hill and you're losing momentum, you need to turn around and head back down that hill before you come to a complete stop. If you're at a complete stop and then you try and turn around on that hill, that's most likely when you're going to go over, especially in a UTV. A quad is obviously different because you can move your weight around to counteract the way that it might want to roll on you. A UTV, you're strapped into the seat and don't have that ability. So something to compare the same concept with, if you go to Vegas and play roulette, when they fling that ball and it has high speed, high momentum, it stays up on the edge. It only drops into a number once it loses that speed and momentum. Same concept holds true when you're going around in the dunes or up on these hills in the Cinders. You need that high speed and high momentum to keep you pressed against the hill or mountain. Now keep in mind, I'm talking about this concept on hills that you're in 4-wheel drive, full throttle, and you are losing momentum and speed going up it. Now at the dunes and at the Cinders, you do have that ability to turn around usually. However, if you're trail riding and don't have the ability to turn around, your best bet is just to try and back down that hill. So now I'm going to do a little bit of a rant on the 3 things that we saw out while we were camping on this trip that leaves you just completely disappointed in the human race. So the first thing was, we were out riding early morning and we came across somebody's campfire from the night before that they did try and smother out but did not do a good job, and it had reignited. And there was no one to be found anywhere. So I actually had gotten out, taken my shovel and tried smothering it out some more. However, I did not feel good about leaving it. So we had actually looked up the ranger number, but it was before 8 o'clock. And we couldn't get a hold of them, so we ended up calling 911 and they transferred us to the Forest Service. Now I run a GPS on my Razor, so I was able to give the Forest Service the GPS coordinates. We were actually getting ready to go riding again and we saw the forest truck coming down a trail, so we actually backtracked and took them directly to the fire, so we made sure they found it. We stuck around and talked to them a little bit and asked them how often this kind of thing happens, and they say more than it should. And they said with the winds, with what they were that morning, if that was an open flame, it could have easily spread to the shrubbery to the left here and caused a forest fire. So they actually asked us if we wanted to name this fire because of the fact that we were the ones who called it in. And I had my daughter come up with a name and she named it the Ruby Fire. They're actually labeling this little pink ribbon right here and they tied it to the shrub. My youngest got a kick out of that. So as far as them putting it out, is they would spray it down with water, then they would open it up and spray it down with water again. They went through that process several times, and you'll see each time they open it up, it started smoking again. So this was a pretty hot log that was still there and could have easily reignited again. So what really drove me nuts about this is the fact of they didn't even do this fire in a fire pit, and it was right next to that shrubbery. Now maybe nothing would have happened and it would have eventually went out on its own, but what if it hadn't and started a forest fire? So the reason I'm saying this, guys, is just be careful and use a fire pit. If you're willing to take the time to build a fire and use it, you need to be willing to take the time to make sure it's out completely as well. So we actually ended up leaving before they did. They said they had to stick around a little bit and make sure it wasn't going to reignite still. And we had some more riding to do. So they thanked us and we went on our way. One of the other things that drove the wife and I absolutely nuts on this trip was when we drive by a campsite and just see it covered with trash. What makes people think it's okay to treat Mother Nature like it's a landfill? We also saw this tree that somebody had taken an automatic rifle to. Now I'm a gun owner too and I like to go out shooting as well. But take some targets with you and do it responsibly, instead of damaging a tree that's been there for probably over 50 years. So this last picture is all a bunch of garbage we pulled off of another campsite that was near ours before we took off for the weekend. I guess my point is, guys, is let's try and keep Mother Nature clean enough so it's around for future generations to come. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.